Welcome to Staffing Stories, hosted by Andy Moss. Andy has been in the staffing industry for over 25 years, first as a recruiter, then eventually an account manager and business owner. This is the podcast where we sit down with fellow staffing owners to get the real stories of the successes, the failures, and the lessons learned along the way.
And we're back with another episode of Staffing Stories. I'm your host, Andy Moss, and all this is made possible by 3DIQ. So if you use Bullhorn and you're looking for a new way of submitting resumes, get faster feedback, better placements, please look at 3diq.com and give them a shout. But I'm happy to have a guest today, and Mr. Rob Murphy with Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. Glad to have you, Rob. Now, our great state of Alabama, just south of us.
Don't worry, Andy. I am a Knoxville guy, actually. Go Vols.
I know. That's what I like to hear. We need as many of our Vol fans plucked everywhere. So I'm glad that you're with us. And I'm sure you don't get razzed too bad down there this year.
No, life has been a lot better this year than it has in previous years. It's been very enjoyable. We've, after 15 or 16 years, it was building up. It was.
Oh, yeah.
And I've lived down here in Huntsville since 2016. So, that tension certainly has been building. But I will say I was actually on the field at Neyland, cigar in hand, when we beat Alabama. So it was a good day.
You were on the field along with everybody else in Knoxville.
That's right. Absolutely. I did not risk my life for a goalpost, but I did view the celebration.
We're happy for that win, but hey, glad you're with us. And staffing is a small world, and being from Knoxville and being in Alabama now, just introduce yourself, just who you are, what company you're with, and just go take us through the story.
Sounds great, man. So I actually was born in Nashville, Brentwood, south of Nashville. Grew up there, went to high school there, Brentwood Academy. Went to the University of Tennessee, had a lot of fun there, graduated 2013, and did various other things, coached a lot of basketball, still coach basketball. I actually still coach high school basketball down here in Huntsville, a school called Whitesburg Christian Academy, and have a blast with that. And I kind of have maintained the basketball coaching throughout a variety of other full-time jobs, including this one. And when I was in Knoxville a few years after college, coached at Concord Christian School, coached some basketball there as well as some AAU basketball. And how did I get into this? 2.5 years ago, wife was pregnant with our second child. We really didn't want her to work outside the house. And I was working full-time at the school here. I was actually doing fundraising and just was looking for jobs, man. Applied for some sales jobs, getting back into sales, applied for a couple of recruiting jobs. I didn't know recruiting existed, didn't know it was a thing. And, but it seemed like my speed. And after I got rejected at those places I applied, I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to do my own thing. And so God's been good to us. And 2.5 years later, the doors are open, and we have our challenges, but life is good.
So, you didn't work under another agency for a while. You just said, no, I'll do this.
Yep.
Learn as you go.
That's right. And really my idea at the beginning was that, that I would really serve as the new client, new business development guy, find somebody who knows how to recruit, which, is the opposite of the way that the big firms do it. You start as a recruiter, and then after you learn the business, then you begin to dive in. Sometimes, some people do, to the business development side. But I figured, I've got some sales chops, and the fundraising gig was essentially sales as well. Helped me build a network down here too. And so that's what we did. And we've got some amazing recruiters who deliver the goods when I'm able to get somebody in the door.
So what industry did you kind of go after? Did you have some contacts from just fundraising? Like okay, and Huntsville is a huge tech market, especially with engineering. I mean, did you start there, or where did you kind of cut your teeth?
Yeah. So, most of my contacts were in the Department of Defense world, government contracting. That's definitely, that's by far the biggest industry here. And
Yeah.
that encompasses a number of things. Those contractors will get jobs in a variety of skill sets, whether it's cybersecurity or radar frequency engineers or general computer science, and then you do have some commercial facing businesses here too. We're now kind of at a point where we have clients in a number of cities and states, but probably still the bulk of what we do is that IT, cybersecurity, computer science
Yeah.
type of stuff, whether that's government facing or commercial facing. We also have gotten pretty heavily actually into sales recruiting. That's probably our secondary thing. Um, that was kind of a natural transition for me, having been in sales, was to do some sales recruiting. I actually used to have a little sales podcast, but I'm lazier than you, Andy. I stopped it while you continue.
Well, this podcast has been fun. It's something that I probably would say I'm not natural at. It's just I like to talk with other individuals, so I was like, you might as well record it. But everybody has a story of genesis of how they got to where they're at, and yours is pretty amazing just to kind of go at it from a sales versus, because that's the natural ways you start off as a recruiter. You kind of learn the business, you learn what's good and what's not, and then you move into sales. But you kind of went the other way. I could sell. I just need some great recruiters. So how did you go find your first recruiter or two?
Man, just honestly got on LinkedIn, called people I knew, but then mostly just got on LinkedIn to see who was looking for a job and who wanted to take a leap of faith here.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, our 2-3 recruiters, I had no prior connection to them whatsoever. Just reached out on LinkedIn, had a conversation. Now I probably reached out to a total of 30, 40 people. It was interesting. It was actually my very first recruiting effort ever.
Yeah. Your first rec on the board was a recruiter.
That's right, man. Yeah, my first rodeo. So, probably reached out to 30, 40 people. And out of that found just some awesome folks who've been incredible and have just, allowed me to do this because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them.
So family is important. You said that you wanted your wife to, work obviously with the kids, not necessarily out of the house. And that was the same driving motivator that I had when I was, coming up. It's like, you know what, I can control my hours. I can control what I do, but I did not want my wife to try to hold a full-time job. Walk me through kind of your, just that conversation when you tell your wife, I'm going to start this business. How did that go? After you probably picked yourself off the ground a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was interesting because my wife typically has been an extremely risk-averse person.
Yeah.
And so I went into that conversation thinking she's never going to go for this. And, it's interesting. I prayed a lot about it. She prayed a lot about it. We both did. And it really was interesting because it was probably the first time in our marriage that she has approached something that's been very high risk.
Yeah.
And actually felt good about it. She was way less concerned than I thought she would be. And hey, also the risk calculation changes when you can't get another job that pays the bills, right? So like this sounds better than keeping on applying for stuff and not getting it. So let's do it.
Well, that is good. Now, so you coach basketball on the side. So it's amazing in our industry. There's so many athletes. I think it's just like, it's just natural for athletes to get into this business, but you still have that connection coaching basketball. How do you balance it?
Yeah, man. That's the key challenge in my life is balancing work and family and basketball and making sure the family stays first in that equation. It's hard, man. Recruiting world is intense. You know that far more than I do. You've been doing this longer than I have. And so how do I balance it? Man, to really point out two things that have helped me. One, which I knew this from day one, I've sought out counsel and advisors and people that A, have been in recruiting, or B, have owned small businesses. And I didn't have the time to waste on trial and error.
Yeah.
I needed people to tell me, here's how to spend your time. You've got X hours allotted to get the job done. Here's how those hours need to be spent. Here's what you need to outsource. Here's where you have to provide the value yourself. And so obviously it all comes down to time management as far as balancing multiple things. But when it, more specifically within time management, it's finding people who are smarter and more experienced than I am to tell me how I need to spend my time. And then it's just being laser focused during that time on getting the job done. I don't have the ability to, or the luxury to get distracted and, hang out, during work hours or, shoot the breeze for 45 minutes about college sports. Like when I'm working, I'm working.
Yeah.
And that's the way it has to be.
Well, athletes in nature are disciplined individuals. And I think that's what I like about this industry. The ones that are disciplined that, okay, it's, every day is different, but it's still structured. Like I get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just mess around.
Right. Absolutely. And
So,
hey, I don't want to, go out of bounds here, but
sure.
I am curious to hear some of your background too, man. I know you were super successful at Aerotech and maybe one other place before that. And then you started Enforce and then you started 3D IQ. And man, what stands out to you as the interesting parts of that journey?
The balance right there that we just talked about is don't bite off more than you can chew. It's my career has been a blessing to say the least. And, God has opened doors and he's shut them. And when things are great, they're great. When they're bad, but it all levels out. But, I got in this business in the late 90s and didn't know a thing about staffing and recruiting. A good friend of mine just pulled me into it. And then I guess the 07, I decided to start my own thing. And that was a blessing. And then about 5 years ago, had an idea for 3D IQ and got that going. But it's been tough balancing it all. But, I wouldn't change a thing. But it's one of these days, your hair will look like mine in this industry. But, it's fun.
Now, is Enforce still active too? You're doing both Enforce and 3D IQ now? Okay.
So my left foot's in Enforce, my right foot's in 3D IQ, and I got awesome employees that work with me. Or that's the key. And you talk about finding great recruiters. When you work with great people, every day is a fun day.
Yep.
And I get pleasure seeing them succeed. And my job right now is I've done the playing. Now I'm coaching, and I guess when I say coaching, I look at myself as like the old coach on the bench. Like, hey, try this, try to cut down the mistakes that are made. But it's fun watching those. I say kids. They're the age of my son. Compete daily and motivate and walk them off the cliff sometimes. Like, hey, it's all right. I've been there. It's never fun seeing somebody get kicked in the teeth, but it's part of this business, and
sure,
you can't avoid it. But I've enjoyed it. It's been an unbelievable career. If you had to sit here and tell someone in college, thinking about being a recruiter, what would you tell them? I mean, if you had to say, get ready, this is what you're going to face.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about sports, and there's definitely a component of that. And to even dial in a little bit further, I think baseball is the sport that really relates the most. I'm not a baseball guy. I actually, the last time I played organized baseball or tried to play organized baseball, I was cut in 8th grade because I showed up in jorts to baseball tryouts. So I am not a baseball guy, but I do think that baseball is the sport that relates the most, because if you succeed 40% of the time, you're the greatest ever.
Yeah.
And if you, and that applies to sales in the same way that it applies to recruiting. But if you're the type person that if you've been working really hard on something for a month and it falls apart, if that's just going to wreck you, then this is not the career for you. Because how it is, man. If you're batting the right percentage, it's all going to be awesome. But even when you are batting the right percentage, it's going to be failure more often than success.
You got to get the bat off your shoulder and swing. You're never going to succeed if you never take a swing. And sales is like, you got to knock on those doors. Those are your swings. You're going to hit one out every now and then. But yeah, you're right. You're going to strike out more than you succeed. And that's what makes, I think, this industry more competitive, kind of like a sport. But, if you've been in it long enough now, what do you not like about our industry that you would love to change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the way I would answer that would actually be to say that the way I look at it, there's just so much that I can't change. And I think that I've suffered by honestly focusing on wishing I could change my client or my candidate.
Yeah.
And now we certainly have amazing clients and candidates, but the ones that are not in that top tier, they're not my favorite client. Won't name names, but the clients that aren't my very favorite, the candidates that haven't been my very favorite. I wish that I could change them, but I think that, to me, I don't know of any big industry-wide change I'd like to see. What I would love is to just honestly get better at accepting the things I can't change and focus on doing the best I can at the things I can control.
That is so true. And you can only control certain things because we are dealing with human nature. We're humans. There's so many points that we can't deal with. But I think if I had to ask myself some things that I would change would be I think our industry, I wish everybody that does staffing and recruiting would do it the right way. I think there are groups that just sling resumes, they throw it on the wall and hope it sticks, and they give our industry a bad name. And I think if everybody just would have high standards to what we do, then I think we'd be accepted more across the board. But I can't count how many times I've walked into offices and talked to them and they've had a horrible experience with the past recruiter and I'm like, hey, we're going to change that. And then they love us. But it's just, I'd rather not do that.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And that is something I'd love to see change too. And, I also hate that, I don't want to harp too much on that, but I'll just say I completely agree. Yeah, and we run into the same thing, man. And it's, I don't know why, but it seems like in staffing that there's just so much and such a prevalence of people that do it what you and I would say is the wrong way, that it's almost like there's a stigma about us before we even start a conversation. And you got to battle against that when you're having new conversations with people. And
we shouldn't do it. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to leave you with one last question. So if we had to pull your Netflix or Hulu, whatever it is, what are you grinding on?
Man, I tell you, Lindsay and I, we step out of the box occasionally and try new things. We found a couple of great, totally random Christmas movies on Netflix recently. But as far as the daily grind, I'm a classic guy, man. I'm on Peacock, and we love just turning our brains off at 9 p.m. and watching either The Office or Parks and Rec. Yeah, they never get old, man. Those two never get old.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, it's great to talk to you, Rob. And I wish you the best of luck down there in Alabama. And please wear the orange proud. Do us right down there. And don't let any of those Auburn or Bama fans razz you too bad.
Sounds great. Hey, thanks so much for having me, Andy. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to meet you.
The Staffing Stories podcast is brought to you by 3DIQ, founded by recruiters for recruiters. 3DIQ's industry-leading product suite complements your submission process in Bullhorn from start to finish and helps you deliver a cutting-edge customer experience. Triple your placements with our powerful resume submission platform, candidate marketing, and client portal. Visit 3diq.com/stories to learn more.